What's going on, YouTube? Eric Bauer, back again. Another high defamation review. Last review for the month of October. That's Halloween month for you Philistines that don't know. Tomorrow being the day of days, Halloween, October 31st. And that's when you're going to be seeing this here review on 1992's Dust Devil, directed by Richard fucking Stanley. Check it out.
Back in the first times, in the time of the red light, desert wind, Suupwa, was a man like us, until, by mischance, he grew wings and flew like a bird. He became a hunter, and like a hawk, he flew to seek his prey, taking refuge in those far corners of the world where magic still lingers. But having once been a man, so does he still suffer the passions of a man, flying in the rages sometimes, to vent his wrath upon the earth. The people of the great Nhadiep have another name for those violent winds that blow from nowhere. They call them dust devils.
Now, more astute subscribers to the channel that have been to the community page or the community tab on the High Defamation page, the Eric Bauer YouTube page, will have noticed that I put up a poll, again, of 4 more titles that have been on my plate that I was intending to get around to this month anyway. And the overwhelming majority of you voted for Paul Naschy's Night of the Werewolf. That's not what we're discussing because, sad to say, my DVD, RIP, suffers from extreme disc rot. Which is weird because it's not that old of a DVD. I have discs way older that are absolutely fine. However, Night of the Werewolf, totally unplayable. We went with the second choice option, again, that being 1992's Dust Devil, directed by Richard Stanley. Now, Richard Stanley, of course, as the director, where did he get his start? Music videos and documentaries. He's got a lot of good documentaries, 3 of them which are present on this disc. Now, this isn't going to be a discussion of this particular rendition of the Dust Devil feature. His first studio film would have been Hardware from 1990, a personal favorite of mine, sci-fi horror, indebted to the likes of Alien as well as Terminator, with a lot of metaphysical, philosophical suggestion, for lack of a better term. Now, after Hardware, which he actually got a fair amount of success for, and was put out for New Line, if I'm not mistaken. The Weinsteins gave him another project, or greenlit another project. That would have been Dust Devil, which he then followed up with and attempted directing The Island of Dr. Moreau. Now, anybody who is a fan of science fiction cinema should have a pretty good idea of the travesty that befell the Island of Dr. Moreau production. Needless to say, he was fired and replaced with a John Frankenheimer who basically completely phoned in his direction. Stanley has infamously gone on to be known for the guy who attempted to sabotage the production from inside after he was canned from the project. That kind of stymied his career. Went back to documentaries, did a couple shorts on 1 or 2 anthology films, and had a comeback last year, 2019, with The Color Out of Space, the H.P. Lovecraft adaptation starring Nicolas Cage. In Nicolas Cage's best role since Mandy. Not that Mandy happened a long time ago, but go back further and you'll see that questionable gray area of Cage's career. Yeah, brought back to livelihood by the mad talent of Richard fucking Stanley. Now, Dust Devil is a fucking fantastic movie. We're gonna run through the cast. First on the casting board, Chelsea Field, great actress. She starred in the movie Prison in 1987 with Viggo Mortensen. That was an early directorial effort from Rennie Harlan. She also starred in Death Spa 1989, as well as The Last Boy Scout in 1991. She played opposite Bruce Willis, his estranged wife in the film. She was also in Harley Davidson, The Marlboro Man in 1991 with Don Johnson and Mickey Rourke. Kind of a storied career. She's gone on to do a lot of other work since then. Not really any genre fare. That's the way it goes. Also co-starred, or I guess shared the top billing with a then kind of unknown actor named Robert John Burke. Now, Robert John Burke would go on to be recognizable for portraying Alex Murphy in the third of the RoboCop franchise. Also the weakest, lamest, and most difficult to get through installment of the RoboCop franchise. I'm actually a big proponent of Part 2. Part 1's a classic, unfuckwithable in my opinion. But yes, Robert John Burke, he took over Peter Weller's position and he portrayed Alex Murphy. He also went on to be in the Stephen King adaptation Thinner in 1996 that co-starred Joe Mantegna. That's a pretty underrated King adaptation in my opinion. It's not great. It's not up there with the best of all time, but it's pretty fucking good. Also on the cast of Dust Devil, we have, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Zakes Moquet. Very recognizable character actor. He has been in a lot of work. He is originally from South Africa. Unfortunately passed away back in 2009. Left behind, like I said, a really large legacy. Not just including Dust Devil, but 1988's The Serpent and the Rainbow, Wes Craven production, as well as the movie Body Parts in 1991 starring Jeff Fahey. And he was also in Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman in 1995. There's a lot of other folks milling about within Dust Devil. One of the other actors of note would be William Hootkins. William Hootkins Hoot, as he was affectionately known on or to the cast and the crew at the time. He famously got his start as Porkins, 1977 Star Wars. He also went on to have a fairly strong role in Tim Burton's Batman, 1989, as well as in Hardware, the preceding Richard Stanley joint, 1990. He was in Death Machine with Brad Dourif. Unfortunately, William Hootkins passed away in 2005. Now, what is Dust Devil about? Well, Dust Devil is a very multifaceted film. It would be super difficult to really do a full-on breakdown of the film within the time that I kind of want to allow myself here. As far as the basic scenario goes, it's set in Namibia and South Africa. and kind of roughly takes place during the time that South Africa handed power back to Namibia for their independence, right around 1989, 1990. And the politics that kind of were present in that region during that time are really present in this movie. There's a lot of political undertones that you don't really have to look for. They're not super subtle, but if you're not really keeping an eye, or you're not really like in tune with Stanley's the style of project with which Richard Stanley takes upon himself, there's something that there's a lot of things that are pretty easy to miss. Now that's potentially one of those things. As far as the specifics of the plot, it concerns the whereabouts of a nameless man who's basically the mortal incarnation of the Supwa. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation, but that roughly kind of translates to the name given to the wind by the Namibian people way back. As far as that wind goes, it's kind of heralded as a presence that was previously human or mortal, as it were. And basically left to wander the far corners of the earth, residing where magic still exists. It would also be fair to compare the titular wind spirit, the dust devil, as it were in the title, as a grim reaper of sorts. A presence there to escort souls that basically are no longer willing to live on Earth, or no longer have the will to remain on Earth, escorts them to the afterlife in exceedingly unpleasant ways. Initially, when his presence is detected, is attributed to a serial killer. Clearly, as the movie progresses, it becomes evident that it's much more than a serial killer at play here. There's a lot of intricacies and details in this production. Now, the primary players, you've got Wendy, played by Chelsea Field. She has a fight with her husband, who basically, after receiving a strange phone call the preceding evening, is accused of cheating. And he becomes very verbally aggressive, I would say verbally abusive, almost physically abusive. She flees the house to the car and proceeds to drive from Johannesburg, South Africa, with the intent of getting all the way to the coastline of Namibia. At the same time, you have Zakes Mokai's Detective Mukurab, who receives a similarly odd phone call the preceding night, and then gets swept up investigating basically all of these murders happening along the highway between South Africa and southern Namibia, which eventually leads all parties involved to, I believe it's an old German establishment. I want to say Namibia was originally of, well, as far as colonialization goes, the Germans, while South Africa was British and colonizers. Wow. You know, it's only a matter of time when I do these things before I start stumbling over my words, stuttering, and forgetting what I was going to say. So the fact that we're 12 minutes in at this point before the first real hiccup, pretty impressive, let me tell you. Anyway, that aside, they end up in a town called Bethany in Namibia. It's a real town, a real ghost town, I want to say at this point. Buildings are still standing there. Last I went ahead and tried doing some of my, diligent research on the internet. Now, as far as the movie goes, that's your plot outline. That's your rundown right there. What it really comes down to is the cast being able to carry the movie, as well as Richard Stanley's direction, which is impeccable in this movie. I should also note that the movie was shot The photography that is by Stephen Chivers, who originally worked with Richard Stanley on Hardware in 1990, and he utilizes a lot of the same camera tricks and stylings that he did in Hardware. You'll see a lot of callbacks to old giallo, specifically work by Argento, but you'll also see nods to, and this is pretty obvious, spaghetti westerns such as The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly by Sergio Leone, which was, I'm pretty sure, specifically referenced by Stanley as an influence on Hardware at the time. Not only that, but there are some nods to film work by Pasolini in there, as well as Buñuel, if I'm not mistaken. And it's really all loving homage as opposed to cribbing these stylings and basically saying that, taking itself for something super original. Now, it is an original film in that not a lot of movies like this were coming out in 1992. It feels a lot more like a horror film that would have been produced in the mid-'80s or even the late '70s, just in how it was shot, a lot of the use of lighting, which is phenomenal. The colors and the saturation of the film and the color grading of the film, as well as the framing. And I should note that the framing of shots in this movie, and we'll see an example come up on the screen there, are almost as important as the plotting itself in the film. Some of the shots carry as much story and as much detail as what you would get normally with character exposition. So it's crafted very well by all of the collaborators that went toward making this movie a reality. I should also note the soundtrack. Stephen Boswell, who he worked with fucking Michel Soavi with Stage Fright. Wow, I'm losing my train of thought. Soavi on Stage Fright. Jesus fucking Christ. Worked with Michel Soavi on Stage Fright, also known as Aquarius, and I believe Delirium in some countries. And fucking Boswell also did the score to the Lamberto Bava sequel to Demons 2, which in one of my more recent videos I showed the soundtrack to. And his soundtrack work on this film is never less than stellar. Honestly, it's phenomenal all across the board, and it fits the movie to a T. As far as matching up with the feeling that you would get from the locations to where it's shot. I mean, everywhere that's basically captured in this film is like a desert wasteland. Just where nothing exists but sand and dust and grime and scorpions and vultures and basically nothing good, or nothing that would convey the ability for life to exist there, which really gives it like an otherworldly sort of feel. I would warrant that Richard Stanley also saw the movie Razorback, directed by Russell Mulcahy in the mid-'80s, about the giant killer razorback in Australia, one of the greatest exploitation movies ever, in my opinion. He kind of recaptures a lot of that dreamy imagery of the desert or outback as it's portrayed in Razorback, but here it's the fucking desert. It's desolate, it's dirty, it's vast and harsh and unforgiving. And it's not just portrayed or captured within the cinematography, it's captured on the actors' faces that continue keeping up with the film as it moves forward. Some of the actors disappear and then reappear inexplicably, but the actors that pull through for the long haul, they sell it. They sell that location, and again, it was shot on location, so They were living that sort of terrain during the production of the film. It's super impressive. Now, as far as Dust Devil the movie goes, back in the day, it was critically received okay. There were definitely detractors who did not care for it, and a lot of that had to do with the meddling of the Weinsteins, who were happy with the project when it was finished, but wanted cuts to portray more of a sense of action, which was what was really booming cinematically or theatrically back then. So a lot of the exposition, or a lot of even just like establishing shots, or even entire scenes ended up getting cut out of the movie. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense. It was visually stunning, but kind of nonsensical. In 2006, Subversive Cinema, this company right here, they put out this massive effort which combines the theatrical cut, the final cut, which is basically a recut edition of what Richard Stanley really wanted to put out there in the first place, as well as like an even longer work print. Now the work print's super rough. I actually haven't bothered to revisit the theatrical cut since like the 1990s. The only version that I've watched on this set is the final cut, which in my opinion is the penultimate version of Richard Stanley's Hardware. This is an amazing horror film. And it manages to be that because it transcends being just a straight horror film. There's a lot of different tropes that are combined to make a really wonderful whole within this film. And it's just fantastic. It is probably the best movie that I've talked about since I started talking about movies on this channel. I cannot urge you to see this enough. It's absolutely mandatory viewing for fans of horror, fans of fantasy, fans of just a road movie, really, is what this is at its heart. Yeah. See this shit. It fucking rules. 2 very enthusiastic thumbs up. Peace out, YouTube. Until next time, keep it real, and thanks for everything. Thanks for keeping this channel going and for keeping the dialogue coming with every one of these videos that I put out there. Take care of yourselves and have a fucking great Halloween.